Now, in general, I don't tend to cover updates with Elementor or Elementor Pro very often these days, unless there's something that piques my interest. Basically because, well, let's be honest about it, they're playing catch up in so many areas, there's nothing that's that exciting. Today, we are going to be looking at two features, still experimental admittedly, but they are two features that I think are very useful and something that I know for myself. I've been asking for these for many, many years. So let's take a look at the first one. So first of all, what am I talking about here? Well, it's the display conditions for elements. Yes, finally, we are getting display conditions. Probably one of the easiest things that could have been implemented 3 or 4 years ago is actually here in, well, experimental format. Let's take a look at it. Now, as both experimental features, you do need to enable this and make sure you have the beta version installed. Please do not install this on a live site, only install it on a test site, a test environment, so you can try and play around without breaking anything. So all you need to do is come into the settings, into features, scroll through until you find the option for display conditions and set that to be active. Once you've done that, you'll have the option available. Just save your page, job done. For example, I'm going to be using a template, but this works exactly the same on any page or post, that kind of thing, where you want to use Elementor to handle these kind of conditional logic. And let's say, for example, we only want people that are logged in to be able to access the application form download. Well, let's take a look at how to do it. We'll select the element from our page, in this case the button, and we'll come over to the Advanced tab on the left-hand side, scroll down until you see the option for display conditions. So simply click on the display conditions option, and this will open up where we can now start to set up our display conditions. Let's add our first condition, and the nice thing with this is you can stack these on top of each other. You're not limited to just one simple condition, so you could get quite complex here. So first of all, we've got the actual condition we want to check against. So in this example, you can see it says is a page parent. So we can check against what page parent this comes from, or the author, or more kind of logical for most use cases are things like, is this in a specific category? Does it have specific tags? When was it modified, and so on. In our example though, we want to make sure we've got a login status. So we'll choose that from the list. We can choose then whether this is going to be an is option, and then we can see we can choose the logged in. If we chose something else, for example, we may say the role. Again, you can see is perfectly fine, and now we can choose from any of the roles that are predefined as part of WordPress, or any roles that we may create using third-party tools, or if we've got things like WooCommerce installed. You can see we can also do things like day of the week. We can select it, and you can see this now changes the parameters we can use to check against. You can see is still there, but we can also say is not. We can set day of the week, specific day of the week, and we can also set things up like where's the server time, so the location of the server for our actual website. So if you're based in the UK, this would be the UK server time. However, if you wanted to, you can set this to be visitor time, so it's applicable to the actual visitor on the website and their local time, which is quite useful. It's quite a powerful little feature. For this though, let's just put this back to what we want. In this example, we want login status, and we'll say is logged in, but you can see we can choose in or out. And now we could just leave that as a simple standalone condition. Pretty cool, pretty easy. We could also go and add another condition. So we can say the logged in status is, and we can say that, for example, they come from a specific URL. So we can choose this. So let's say we're running adverts or something. We may say that this is coming from or does not contain, contains, and so on. And then we can drop in a URL. So for example, they may be coming from a Google search. And you can check that their login status is set to be logged in, and the URL is, in this case, Google. You can see it's very simple to do. You want to get rid of the second condition, click to X, get rid of it, job done. Then we can hit save and close, and we've now applied a condition to this button. In this example, we can publish it and we can test it out. So I'm currently logged in as an admin. So if we come and take a look at any of these job roles, open one up, scroll down, you can see I can see the application form. Let's open the same page up in an incognito window when I'm not logged in. And you scroll down, you can see that is no longer available. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There are some nice conditions inside there to allow you to build up quite complex and comprehensive conditions. So it is a nice addition. This is still early days, so we will see changes to this probably, maybe some additional conditions added in with feedback from people like you and I. But it is about time we actually saw this. I just wish they'd done this 3 years ago when it was probably a little bit more relevant, and it would have just made a little bit, a more useful kind of setup when you're working with dynamic data, because without any kind of conditional logic, dynamic data becomes partially useless. And, well, that's kind of what was happening. Next on the agenda, the one thing I want to look at is the element manager. Now, what this allows you to do is enable or disable various different elements in the editor in Elementor based upon user roles. It's worth bearing in mind at this point in time that if you make changes here, if an element is being used on the front end of the site and you disable it inside the element manager, it will not disable it on the front end of the site. If that element's being used, that will still display to the end user no matter what user role they are, whether they're logged in, logged out, etc. This only affects the editor itself. Now, to access this, you simply come into Elementor and to the element manager, and then you'll get this panel. So what we can do now is we can choose what we want to handle inside here. So there's going to be lots of elements you may not want people to access to keep a very stripped back, simplistic editor experience for clients that you hand this off to. So let's take a look at how it works. For example, you can see the accordion. We can show the usage inside here. So you can see where this is being used out of site, so we can see it is being used. So if you wanted to, once the site is finished, the design is completed, you could look through and see there's a bunch of different options, elements inside here that are not being used and they never are going to be used, or you could just go and disable them all. Pretty cool. You can see we can then choose the plugin, whether it's Elementor or Elementor Pro, and then we can edit the permissions. So for example, the heading is being used, but let's scroll down until we get something like an inner section, where we're going to say, well, we're not using sections anymore anyway, so we can edit this, and we can say we don't want to make this available to anybody. So we could disable that, and that no longer becomes available to work with. Same thing goes for images. We may not want to use images. Bit silly, but you could do it if you wanted to. But then there's lots more things inside here. Things like SoundCloud. Well, chances are we're never going to be using that in most use cases. Well, let's edit it. Let's get rid of it. And you could, if you wanted to, say, well, an author or something like that could actually have access to it, but you could do that. You can hit Save Changes, say, yep, sure, we want to save these, and we'll say, okay. And then you can see at the top, we've got some filters here as well. So we can search for something. We can choose plugins, so Elementor, WordPress widgets, or Elementor Pro. You can see we can choose the statuses, whether they're active or inactive, and then we can scan element usage and deactivate unused elements. So that's quite nice to see that we can look at this and go, there's a bunch in there. I don't know one by one. I'll hit deactivate, and you can see all those have been deactivated. Now we can hit Save Changes. We'll click Save, and they now should no longer be available. So now if we take a look, you can see that we've got a much more stripped back set of options. So things like the image, which we know wasn't being used in this particular example, we do a search for that, we don't have an image available to us. So we've got a very stripped back set of options. Now obviously we can go back in and enable that if we want to. So let's come back out of here. Let's find our image. Let's enable this. Say we want to make this for all roles, that's perfectly fine. Hit Save Changes and save one more time. Now if we come back and refresh our page with the Elementor editor, if we take a look under Basic, you'll see now image is back and available to us. Now, my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, is that this is only a visual kind of way of working. You may have an impact on the back end of your site where some of these things may not be loaded in, but the front end is still loading in everything. So I don't think we're going to see much of a speed impact, an improvement at least. I could be wrong. If I am wrong, please do let me know in the comments section down below so everybody can know exactly how this works. Well, that's my understanding, is this is more of a stripping things out of the back end and not necessarily making a massive impact on the front end to speed things up for widgets and elements we're just not using in the design. And those are the two areas that I wanted to cover because I think these are the two most interesting in this 3.19 update. Like I say, for me, conditional logic is something I've been asking for an awful long time. So I am glad that they brought it in, but as with so many different things here, it's like it's taken so long to get to the point of including something that is so fundamentally basic with dynamic data that it just kind of seems a bit silly why it's taken this long. But as always, I do welcome your comments and feedback. Drop those in the comments section down below. My name is Paul C. All applicable links are in the description. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.